had that dream again. My small business needs to hire, but I don't use LinkedIn, and I hire wrong. So then I'm doing IT, and when I go to plug the servers in, they become sentient, and they won't let us access our network unless we forward their chain emails and memes to more and more and more people, and then I wake up.
Don't let hiring nightmares ruin your dreams. LinkedIn Jobs' new AI assistant finds and invites best fit candidates to apply, so you can discover talent you may have missed. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/quality. Start hiring today with LinkedIn.
Welcome to the All Things Nintendo podcast. I'm Brian Shea, and this is a weekly podcast to discuss all the biggest news and games from the world of Nintendo. I hope you had a wonderful holiday break. I know I certainly did. Thank you for sticking with me over the last few weeks as I delivered pre-recorded episodes. Unfortunately, there hasn't been a whole lot of news in the time since I got back into the United States. So we are going to do what we do when there are some drier periods here. And we're going to do a solo Q&A episode. That means there's not going to be any guest. It is just going to be me talking with you. In fact, you guys, you all, everybody listening to this podcast who submitted a question when I put out a call a couple of months ago will be the guest of this episode of All Things Nintendo. And, you know, I think we've got some fun questions. I'm just going to get through as many of them as I can. We'll go for about an hour here. And yeah, not a whole lot of big news out there that I really wanted to touch on. So most of this episode will be devoted to answering your questions and talking about the topics you want me to talk about. I have very loosely skimmed through them, so you're going to be getting a lot of my my honest reactions on these. But yeah, I hope you had a fantastic holiday, fantastic New Year. I spent most of my holidays in Japan. I was out in Europe for work, and then I had one day back in Minnesota before I was going over to Japan. And let me tell you, after being away and really on the road for 3 weeks across 3 different time zones, 3 completely different time zones, I'm still jet lagged. I got back almost a week ago at this point, and I'm still going to bed early and waking up early, sometimes waking up in the middle of the night, not able to go back to sleep. So bear with me. I might have a little bit of brain fog here as we navigate this episode. But before we get to your questions, just a few quick things I did want to touch on. Like I said, there's not a whole lot of compelling news to me that has come out over the last couple of weeks that I really want to discuss or like play catch up on. There is the Dragon Quest VII Reimagined demo, which did hit Switch and Switch 2. I don't know if it's on Switch. I think it's on Switch 2. I know it's on Switch 2 because I've downloaded it on Switch 2. But the Dragon Quest VII Reimagined demo is out now. You can go play it. It looks fantastic. I can't wait to get my hands on it. I haven't had a chance to fire it up yet. But that is worth checking out if you're interested in Dragon Quest VII Reimagined. I think that the art style looks incredible in motion for that game. So something to check out if you're looking for something new to play or you want to see what this next game is all about. If you read the Game Informer cover story, you'll be able to check that out. And from what I understand, all the progress carries over. So that's a very good thing. I almost refuse to play demos at this point if the progress doesn't carry over. I just feel like I'm kind of, wasting my time unless it's something for work, obviously. In that case, I will make an exception. Unfortunately, we got 2025 and the beginning of 2026 really, didn't take any prisoners. There's no real easy way to go about doing this, but there were 3 deaths, unfortunately, that kind of surfaced over the last few weeks that I did want to touch on. One of the most high profile one was obviously Vince Zampella, who, just an absolute legend of the industry. If you're not familiar with who he is, he's basically credited as the creator of Call of Duty. He was the co-founder of Respawn, which has done Titanfall 2, Apex Legends, the Star Wars Jedi games, so Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, Star Wars Jedi Survivor. He's basically, he was the guy that Electronic Arts brought in for the most recent Battlefield game to basically fix it, and he oversaw that, and all indications are that he was successful in that endeavor. Yeah, Battlefield 6. He was kind of overseeing this Battlefield Studios conglomerate that came together to make that game after the kind of flop that was 2042 a few years ago. He really rescued the Battlefield series. Uh, was instrumental in the Titanfall, Apex Legends, Star Wars Jedi, and Call of Duty franchises. I mean, I don't really know a good way to fully pay tribute to the impact that this man has had on game development, but it's a terrible series of events. And he was unfortunately I believe a passenger in a car that crashed very late in the year last year, and he sustained just terrible injuries that ended up taking his life. And I met him a couple of times, and he was, a really friendly, outgoing guy. I only met him a couple of times. I don't know him. I didn't know him personally to any real extent, but every time I met him, I had a drink with him at an E3 one year. He was just a really friendly and amicable guy. I enjoyed the conversations I had with him. I only met him because because former Game Informer editor-in-chief Andy McNamara was pretty close with him. And it's just really sad. I got that news when I was over in Japan. I woke up to that news, and it was just kind of one of those things where you just like have to stare at your phone for a second and be like, is this real? Because he's such a larger than life person, such a larger than life presence in the games industry. And I don't know any really appropriate way to eulogize him other than to say, like, he like, look at this: original Call of Duty producer, Call of Duty 2 executive producer, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 4 studio head. So Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare is often cited by a lot of people as one of the greatest shooters of all time. He was in studio leadership all the way through the end of Modern Warfare 2, and then he left Activision to found Respawn, where Titanfall 2, he was the CEO. Apex Legends, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, Star Wars Jedi Survivor, Medal of Honor, Above and Beyond, and of course Battlefield 6, as I mentioned. Like, it's just a guy who, even outside of any kind of personal stuff, which again, like I always had pleasant interactions with him, just an irreplaceable presence in the industry, and somebody who had still so much to give. If I had to guess, I mean, he really gave so much to this industry, and we're not gonna see the influence that Vince Zampella brought to the games industry go away anytime soon. Like, really, just a tremendous loss. And my condolences go out to his friends, his family, his loved ones. As sad as it is for me, like, I didn't know him. I just loved his work. And but sometimes the way we connect with art is enough to really make us feel the impact of the loss of an artist. So rest in peace, Vince Zampella. We also unfortunately lost a couple of folks in the games media space. Excuse me, I have a little bit of a sniffle from I'm recovering from a cold that I had when I was over in Japan. Patrick Dane he was an entertainment journalist. I admittedly did not have, from what I remember, any interactions with him. But he was at Dexerto, or Dexerto. Sorry, I always mispronounce that. He was the news editor at This Week in Video Games most recently. He was at Tech Radar. He was doing freelance. He wrote for metro.co.uk. It's another car accident. Just a really, really sad turn of events. I didn't really have any history with him, but he was always all the eulogies on social media that I've seen really painted him as a great guy. So just another sad story. And then one that was a little bit closer to me personally. Nick Ransbottom, who was a freelancer. He contributed to IGN, Games Radar Plus, Android Central. He has been hospitalized for the past year and a half, and he shared on social media on a couple days ago, as of this recording, that Nick has passed away. And Nick was somebody that I interacted with semi-frequently on social media, and he was always really, really kind, and somebody who would send me recipes. If you follow me on Instagram, I love to cook a lot. He sent me a lot of recipes and would want me to try them out. And he was always talking about how, when he was going to visit Minnesota, he wanted to have some of my cooking. And, it's just, he was stuck in the hospital for the last year and a half. So unfortunately that never happened. And, it was kind of a shock to hear that he had passed away. I know that, again, he's been sick for quite a while, but I think that, it was always kind of the mind that he was going to recover, and he was going to make good on that wish to come to Minnesota. And I was more than happy to oblige, cooking a meal for him. So yeah, just sorry to start this off on a bummer note. I kind of wanted to get that stuff out of the way before we jump into the questions. But yeah, just it's kind of been one thing after another with regards to that. Yeah, so I don't really know any way to transition from that. But let's turn it to a positive note here. First up, Game Informer magazine. I am the executive editor at Game Informer. We have this new issue with World of Warcraft Midnight on the cover, and it's in addition to being just an enormous title that I think a lot of people are really excited for the expansion. I wanted to draw your attention. If you are a fan of my work, this is an issue that, even though I didn't write the cover story, that went to our video editor, Alex Van Aken, our senior video editor. I did have, I would consider like maybe my all-time most proud issue I've ever written. So a few things here. First of all, I talked with, if you're watching the video, you can see the full spread here. I spoke with Katsuro Hashino, who is the director of Persona 3, 4, 5, and Metaphor Refantasio, about Metaphor all these years later, or this Metaphor 1 year later, and then also his involvement with the Persona franchise. If you turn a few pages past that, there's also this Souls-like feature that I've been working on. No joke. I had my first interview for that piece Summer Game Fest 2024 when I sat down with Hidetaka Miyazaki, and it was one of those interviews where everything went great. He was in great spirits. I got to chat with him about, this genre that he really popularized, even though he doesn't want to take credit for it. He's very humble. And from there, this idea that I had. So basically, I was supposed to sit down with him and talk Shadow of the Erd Tree. And this idea of like, I don't want to, everybody's going to be asking about Shadow of the Erd Tree. I want to talk to him about just the rise in popularity of the Souls-like genre. So I walked in, I was like, I don't know how like open he's going to be to this. I know he's in Los Angeles for a specific purpose, and that is to promote Shadow of the Erd Tree. And I sat down with him. I was supposed to have, I think, 30 minutes with him. And he seemed like he was enjoying the interview, but I couldn't tell. It's always hard through a translator. But halfway through that interview, his people interrupted the interview, and I was like, uh-oh, did I say something? And his handlers were like, we were wondering if you'd like to have longer because he's enjoying this interview. And I was like, absolutely. So from there, what I ended up, I wanted to do was I wanted to, use him as the anchor of this piece, talking about the rise and proliferation of the Souls-like genre throughout the industry. And, pulling from his personal history, talking about, what was the team thinking with this? What's your design philosophy with this? And then I built out this enormous feature. I talked to, the head of Team Ninja, who, they've done Neo, they did Rise of the Ronin. They've done a lot of work in the Souls-like genre. I talked to one of the designers at Aggro Crab about Another Crab's Treasure. I talked to just several folks, the Lies of P director. So like, it's just this collection of developers who have made these high profile games in the Souls-like space, and getting, their thoughts on the genre, like what is the future of the genre, and what is, the influence of Hidetaka Miyazaki. So that's another piece that I'm really excited about. And then, the third and final massive piece, because I think the Metaphor Fantasia one is just 2 pages. This one was 12 pages, which is, cover story length. And then I have another large piece right here, where if you are like me, you are a big fan of the Fallout franchise. And I interviewed pretty much, not I want to say everyone, but like most of the most important people involved with the Fallout franchise. So I interviewed Leonard Boyarsky and Tim Kaine, who are the co-creators of Fallout. I interviewed Brian Fargo, who was in charge of Interplay, which was the studio that made Fallout, back then. I talked with all the luminaries at Bethesda, so Todd Howard, Emil Pagliarulo, Angela Broder, Istvan Peli, all the big names at Bethesda. I talked to a couple of folks at Obsidian about their work on New Vegas, and I even talked to people at the Fallout TV show. So Jonathan Nolan, which is amazing because he co-created Westworld as well, and he writes a lot of his brother's movies, co-writes a lot of his brother's movies. So he wrote like the Dark Knight trilogy. He's Christopher Nolan's brother, in case you didn't pick up on that. But I also talked to the folks like Walton Goggins, the actor, Ella Purnell, a bunch of the folks involved with the show, and just really got this 360-degree view of the Fallout franchise. And that's the prose-based piece. And I should have another thing that's even more in-depth over on GameInformer.com very soon. So I don't usually do these rundowns, but that was one. This is an issue that I'm particularly excited about. And I'm sorry that we're getting very long in the housekeeping section here. But I did also want to draw your attention to one more magazine. This is not a magazine that I write for, but Retro Gamer Magazine has a new issue on newsstands now. I just finally found it. Basically, I did an interview with Retro Gamer Magazine for a column that they have, or a feature that they have called Magazine Craft, where they interview folks about kind of their careers, I guess people who are involved with magazines. And it seems like it was my turn. So I had a wonderful conversation with one of the journalists over there, and you can now see it. This is the opening spread if you're watching the video version. And I know how much of a premium magazine space is. I mean, I've been at Game Informer for more than 11 years now, and they gave me 6 pages, which is wild. So if you want to hear my story, or read my story, and like read like my thoughts on Game Informer and the comeback of Game Informer, and my history, Retro Gamer Magazine, it's the one that says 20 years of the Xbox 360, but there's also a thing about the anniversary of Super Mario Brothers. So from a Nintendo perspective, there's something there as well. But yeah, I went to my local Barnes and Noble and found that, and I bought multiple copies. I'm going to get the story framed. But yeah, just a huge honor, a huge thank you to the folks over at Retro Gamer for wanting to include so much of my story. I mean, I when I did the interview, I was like, okay, this is going to be like 1, maybe 2 pages at most. But what an incredible honor to be featured about my career. So thank you to the folks over at Retro Gamer, and Stuart, who was the person I spoke with. Sorry we went very long there with the housekeeping stuff and the sad news about Vince, Patrick, and Nick. But now that that's out of the way, one last plug, and you know what it is. Just a reminder, you're listening to the All Things Nintendo podcast. This show drops in your podcast feeds free each and every Friday. But if you want to support the show even more, you can go over to patreon.com and join the team for as little as $3 a month. That gets you access to the community Discord. But if you want to bump that up to $5 or $10 a month, that gets you access to early and ad-free episodes. The ones over the Christmas break or holiday break dropped very early. Normally they come about 24 hours before the show hits the main feeds, but they're also ad-free. and you get to be a part of the wonderful community. If you'd like to help out the show, go on over to patreon.com and search All Things Nintendo or Brian Shea. You should be able to find it either way. It's only because of the wonderful folks who support this podcast on Patreon that it's able to continue each and every week. All right, with that out of the way, let's jump into some of your questions. Thank you so much to everyone who's submitted them. We have some on Patreon. We have some on Discord. I think we might even have some on Spotify. If we have time for it, we also will probably be able to get to some that are a little bit older from back when I was on Twitter, which, God, that's been forever. But I've been just going through like this. I keep a running tally of stuff. And then if I need to dip into some of the older ones, I have a bank that I can pull from. But let's get to some of the newer ones here. This one comes from ChainWhippin on Discord. They say, Brian, you have notoriously never given a 10 out of 10 review at Game Informer. What are some games you would have given a 10 to if you'd been assigned to the review? And of course, why? Whew. So like I said, I have not really read too many of these. And I saw this one come through. And the one that immediately comes to mind would be Breath of the Wild. And I think that, I mean, there's really not a whole lot of need for explanation there. But, you know, Breath of the Wild is my favorite game of all time. I did not review it. That was given to Kyle Hilliard, which, you know, he also gave it a 10 out of 10. So it's not like we lost anything there. But I think that it's one of those games that really changed the way that I felt optimistic about the games industry. It felt like we were at a point where things were a little bit stagnant in the open world AAA genre, right? Like it was like, okay, you get a checklist, you go do something, you select which item you want to do, and a waypoint appears. And there is a little bit of that in Breath of the Wild, but the way that it just encourages exploration and encourages you to, I guess, just like dig into that world, unlike anything that like games like Assassin's Creed were doing at the time, right? Where Assassin's Creed for a while felt like the gold standard of open world games back in, you know, the late 2000s, early 2010s. And I think that a lot of people had gotten to a point where there was that kind of Ubisoft open world formula fatigue, even though I would argue games like Far Cry also did really compelling open worlds beyond what Assassin's Creed was doing, and well into, you know, later years than when Assassin's Creed was doing something that felt fresh in the open world space anyway. But Breath of the Wild really flipped it on its head and delivered something that I still can go back and play, and it feels fresh, even though we're coming up on its 9th anniversary, which is just unfathomable. That game has been out in our lives for 9 years. But yeah, that's certainly one of them that I would have given a 10. I'm pretty hard to crack that 10. So for people's reference, the two highest review scores I have given at Game Informer have been 9.5s, and they've gone to Forza Horizon 5, which is my favorite racing video game of all time, and Metroid Prime Remastered, which I think that's one of the greatest remasters that has ever been put out. And I mean, if we want to dip back further, I did give some 5 out of 5s when I was at my old website that I co-founded and helped run for 4 years before Game Informer. I'm trying to think of some of the ones that I gave 5 out of 5s, and I was a little bit more lenient back then. But Mass Effect 3, you know, I was actually thinking a 4.5 out of 5 for a while, and then the more I thought about it, I was like, no, I got to bump that up. And that was before they patched the ending. I'll defend the ending of that game, even though I see the criticisms. I still think that if you count the ending as that final sequence when you're planning your attack and you're saying goodbye to your crewmates and everything, I think that is kind of the perfect ending, really. Now, the final cinematic, which is where most people have their gripes, I understand the complaints about that, but I really think that is just that Mass Effect 3 is the culmination of that franchise, even though I think 2 is the best game in the series. I think 3 serves as a strong culmination, and I will defend that game. I think I gave Gears of War 3 a 5 out of 5, which at the time, I think it was one of my favorite shooters of all time after I played Gears of War 3. I know a lot of people have soured on the Gears franchise following 4 and 5, but I mean, it's hard to argue with, if you were a gamer back in the Xbox 360 years, how great that Gears of War franchise was for its time. I'm looking around. I mean, I'm trying to think of like my favorite games of all time. I don't know how many of them I would give 10 out of 10s though. It's really hard for me to justify giving a game a 10 out of 10. Like Persona 5 is one of my favorite games of all time. It's a top 5 video game for me. I don't think I'd give it a 10 out of 10. I think I'd probably land somewhere but 9.25, 9.5. I guess Final Fantasy 10, I'd probably give a 10 out of 10. Ocarina of Time, I'd give a 10 out of 10. But yeah, I mean, maybe Overwatch, when it first came out, I would have gotten a 10, which it got a 10 from former Game Informer editor Dan Tack. So I have no complaints there. Man, that's a tough question, especially since I don't think I've ever even considered giving a 10 at Game Informer, but something I'll think on. And if I think of any others, I will. I mean, it's probably something like the original Red Dead Redemption would get a 10 out of 10. Red Dead Redemption 2 is also pretty high up there for me, but I don't think it would quite reach a 10 for me, even though it is a phenomenal game. Yeah, I mean, it would be a tough. It's a 10. A 10 is a tough nut to crack for me, and if I ever give 10 out of 10 to anything at Game Informer, you will know that I wholeheartedly endorse that game, and yeah. All right, let's move on. Firamar, if I'm mispronouncing that, over on Patreon said, "So Brian, do you think we'll ever see a quantum leap in graphics like we saw with the SNES to the N64? Better yet, do you think the graphics of the next Xbox and PlayStation will be much better than the Switch 2? I think they'll only be noticeable if compared side by side, and it won't be a big difference." Let's tackle that first part first. Do you think we'll ever see a quantum leap in graphics like we saw with the SNES to the N64? No, I don't. I think we've reached a point where it's going to be incremental for pretty much the rest of time. I think that there was a fledgling period, right, where NES came out, or I guess even before that, Atari, Commodore, and Television, all those like kind of, almost, I will say, pre-modern era of gaming consoles existed, and then it was all about bits. If you remember that, it went 8 bits, then 16 bits, then 32 bits, and that was the be all end all of how good the graphics were, and 64-bit, hence the Nintendo 64, and then it became about polygons. Now you've seen this shift, right, where it is less about bits and polygons and all that, and more about resolution and frame rate and processing power and load times and like how fast we can get you into the game. And yeah, like if you look at a PS5 game against a PS3 game, it's night and day difference in terms of how much better it looks. That's why we see so many of these remakes from PS3 on PS5 and Xbox 360 games getting remade for Xbox Series X. It's because there was it was still forward progress, right? But if you look at PS3 to PS5, the jump from PS1 to PS3 is so much more vast, like they were still figuring it out in terms of how to make a game look good. And in some regards, we still are figuring out like what is going to make a game look good. There are times where I see a game and I'm like, wow, that's better looking than anything I've ever seen. But it's not like blow me away the way that I think a lot of people felt when like the original Final Fantasy VII's cutscenes hit their PS1 for the first time. Or when you fired up Super Mario 64 and you saw Mario in 3D for the first time ever. I don't think that we're ever going to have that level of mind-blowing leap ahead just from one console. But I do think it is going to be continued forward progress. I do think that the next PlayStation and Xbox will be better than the Switch 2 by a substantial margin, but that said, I don't think it's going to be as much in the graphics department as it's going to be in the performance department, as it is in the resolution department. Like, we've seen a lot of sporting events start using 8K cameras. I don't know what the utility is of going beyond 4K for gaming. I think that we're still figuring out ways that these systems and these TVs and these display monitors can properly display 4K, and how much that really benefits the end user. So I don't know if we need to go higher than 4K resolution. But I do think that we're going to start seeing more games that once the next Xbox and PlayStation come out, where we're going to have the Switch 2 and we're going to see them continue to get these games on the Switch 2. Like, I don't know, like whatever Call of Duty game comes out in 2028, Microsoft's already said they're going to put Call of Duty games on Switch or Nintendo consoles, which at the time we didn't know it was the Switch 2, but now we do. So if a game comes out in 2028, I think that it'll still come to Switch 2 and it'll still run, but I don't think that it's going to run as well as it will on, like, I don't know, whatever stupid name Xbox comes up with next. They have the dumbest names for their consoles. But the PlayStation 6, I think that's going to be the big thing. Is it's going to be in 4K resolution, 60 frames per second, maybe even higher. Whereas I think that if they try to port that over to the Switch 2, they might have to settle on 1080p or 30 frames per second or a variable frame rate, something like that. So I think that's where the big differences are going to be between Microsoft and Sony and what Nintendo is giving us. And but yeah, I on that first part of like, do you think we're going to see a graphical leap like we saw from SNES to N64? No, I think that those days are behind us. That was an industry, that was an upstart industry that was still getting its feet under it. Like, look at the special effects in movies, and we saw the huge leaps forward that certain technologies brought us. And now it feels like we're kind of we're doing better over year, but it's not like when people saw the first Star Wars for the first time back in the 70s. That was like a huge leap ahead. And then that became more commonplace, and then computerized graphics became more commonplace, and we saw the huge leap forward, like something from like Star Wars Episode 1, where the CGI is very distractingly bad when you watch it in 2026. But then if the leap forward to something like Inception, where those visuals were just mind-blowing for the time, and they're still pretty good, right? Like, I think that now that we've reached that kind of like plateau in movies, and there's always going to be innovations, there's always going to be better looking graphics and computer effects. Like, look at Avatar is one of the coolest looking movies that you could see. But I think that we've also plateaued in the game space in terms of visuals, where it's not a full plateau, but it's a more gradual hill than the sharp cliffs that we were jumping up before.
It's football season, and you can now get almost anything you need for game day delivered with Uber Eats. What do we mean by almost? Well, you can't get a running back delivered, but you can get baby back ribs delivered. A strong defense? No. A strong deodorant? Yes. A six-pack of abs? Nope. Six-pack of beer? Yes. Get almost anything for game day delivered with Uber Eats, official on-demand food delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Alcohol 21 plus and in select cities. Product availability varies by region. See app for details.
So next over, Fizzy Pop 6537 over on Spotify, which, by the way, if you're watching this or listening to this on Spotify, I love receiving comments there, and on YouTube for that matter as well. So thanks to everyone who leaves comments, and whether they're positive or negative, over on Spotify and YouTube. It does mean a lot, and it does give quite a, from what I understand, a boost in the algorithm of making this show more discoverable. So thank you to everyone who does that. But Fizzy Pop asks, how come Nintendo never buys game developers? Do they rather collaborate with other devs? Love the podcast. So this is an interesting question, because Nintendo has bought a few developers, but it's not on the scale of something like, Microsoft has done, which is just absurd spending spree, and we're seeing kind of the fruits of that with a lot of raising prices and unfortunately layoffs. Um, Nintendo already has Nintendo's already the greatest game developer that has ever existed, right? Like, I don't think that there's any argument that could be made that there's any development company that has put out better work year over year, decade over decade, and more consistently great than Nintendo. A lot of statements that I make on this show, I would listen to an argument to the contrary. I don't think that there is any logical explanation that could counter that Nintendo is the best, most prolific, and most consistent game developer to ever exist in this industry. Now, people might say like, "Oh, Rockstar is great as well," but yeah, but they just don't put out enough stuff to really rival Nintendo, and also they don't have the longevity of Nintendo. So they've bought a few developers, right? They bought ND Cube, right? They have Intelligent Systems. Let me see what developers they have under there. They bought Monolith as well, right? Let's see. So we have the list of development studios here. So yeah, they have Monolith Soft. They have Next Level Games, which does Mario Strikers and Luigi's Mansion and Punch Out, Metroid Prime Federation Force, Nintendo Cube, which I refer to as ND Cube. They do like the Mario Party series now. So yeah, they don't really have a ton. They bought Retro Studios, which I think has been a fantastic investment. They give us the Donkey Kong Country Returns and Tropical Freeze, and then the Metroid Prime series. Obviously, a great investment there as well. But I think they're a lot more particular about their acquisitions, and they can be because they have such a great output that they don't really need to. Now, I don't know. Do they not own? I guess they don't own Intelligent Systems, do they? Let's see. No, they're just published. They almost exclusively. Okay, so the Wikipedia page says the company is well known for almost exclusively working with Nintendo, despite not being owned by Nintendo in any capacity. So Intelligent Systems is one of those where I've always thought, all right, I just assume that they're owned by Nintendo, but because they do the Fire Emblem series, they do Paper Mario, they do WarioWare, they do Advance Wars, but they are not owned by Nintendo. But yeah, I mean that seems like it would be a logical acquisition. But I just don't think Nintendo needs to acquire any studios, right? Like they have great working relationships with a lot of third parties. Like I think that for a lot of, especially coming off the success of the Switch One, it being one of the greatest selling consoles to ever be released. I think a lot of developers are jumping at the chance to get their game on Switch. I mean, we see Xbox publishing games on Switch. We see Sony publishing games on Switch. We got Lego Horizon Adventures. We got MLB The Show from Sony. We get a lot of Microsoft games coming over to Switch, which I'm actually surprised there haven't been more Microsoft games coming to Switch too, especially. Maybe we'll get more of that as Microsoft starts revving up its engines for its anniversary, which is in 2026 for Xbox. But yeah, I think that Nintendo likes to take a more hands-off approach when it comes to working with third parties. Like they will bring in Omega Force to make their Hyrule Warriors games, or God, I forget the indie studio that did Crypt of the Cadence of Hyrule, but the Crypt of the Necrodancer developer. So, and then Ubisoft for Mario and Rabbids. Like I think that Nintendo does prefer to collaborate rather than acquire, because that way they can, kind of just there are fewer variables, I think, in terms of that. As long as they have creative control and they are collaborating with these developers, I think that they're fine with that, and they don't need to spend the money, and they can be smart and invest that in their own products rather than, spending all that money to acquire a studio that then they have to run, which I think is an underrated part of that a lot of these companies don't really take into account. Is when you buy a studio, you're not just buying their IP and you're buying, the right to create games under that studio umbrella. You're buying a lot of salaries and a lot of expenses as well. Like you have to pay for their office, you have to pay for their salaries, you have to do all this stuff. That's why we see all these problems when these acquisitions happen. So I think that that's the approach that they love to, they prefer to take. All right, let's go over to Emil Nathanson on Discord. He says, sorry if I missed this previously, but what is your educational background? Did you study journalism or some kind of writing major? Where did you go to school? In Minnesota? So my background is weird, right? So, and this actually, this folds into another question, which we'll get to after this. It's not that big of a folding into, but it will answer a little bit of the next question I want to touch on. So my educational background, I went to college in a East Coast of Maryland school called Salisbury University. And I studied conflict analysis and dispute resolution. And originally I went to school for computer science, and I lasted about one semester there before I was spending every single Saturday and Sunday in the computer lab trying to, fruitlessly program the most basic applications you could possibly imagine and turning it in and still getting a poor grade. So I lasted one semester, losing all my weekends and still doing poorly and doing terrible in really math I didn't really like. So I quit that major, and I had a friend, one of my good friends to this day. He was in a major called conflict analysis and dispute resolution. And it was, you could take different tracks of like interpersonal conflict, intergroup, international, and people could use it for anything to being a mediator. You could be an arbitrator. You could be like, you could take things to be a better meeting facilitator. Or some people even used it almost as like a proxy for a pre-law degree. And then my minor was philosophy, which, if you look at that combination, you might say, well, what does that have to do with games journalism? And I will tell you, not a whole lot. However, what it did have to do with my career was it gave me the ability to craft an argument and to get better at writing. Philosophy was all about taking a point and arguing it and exploring all aspects of that topic and figuring out where you stand on a topic. And I think that experience was invaluable for my my career path. And conflict resolution, that major didn't really have a whole lot of tests. It was all about writing and assessing a topic, sometimes a more abstract topic. So I think that is how that contributed to my my career path. Unfortunately, my college did not offer journalism until my senior year, and I looked into it, and it would have taken me 2 more years to get that as a double major. So I looked into it, and I was like, it's going to be a lot of money if I want to stay here for another year and a half at the time that they added it, to try to knock out all the requirements for that major. So I ended up not doing that, but I did take a couple of courses, like night school, at a community college when I was living in Pittsburgh. One was writing for the magazine industry, which that ended up working out okay, I guess, or writing for print. But it's funny because I did do an internship over at the newspaper that was in Salisbury, Maryland, the Delmarva Daily Times. I interned at their entertainment insert that they did, I think, on the weekends. It's called Beachcomber. And I would just interview developers, musicians that were coming through and performing in the beach area, that Ocean City, Maryland, or in Salisbury for that matter, or just anywhere in that region. So I would have interviews with different musicians, which played off of what I was doing in my spare time at the time, where I was an RA in college, and I was stuck in office hours for a long, long time. And it, I'd run out of stuff to do. So I co-founded a music website back in, I guess that was 2007. I co-founded this music website, and maybe it was 2006. But basically it was something to do. So I would just hang out on there, and I would write album reviews. I would listen to albums, do that. And then I got this feeling like, we could do more with this. So I started reaching out to musicians on MySpace, which really, really dates me there. And we started, I started getting interviews with people who, I felt like I was really punching above my weight. It was just this small music website that I was co-running, and we were getting folks that were heavily involved with Guitar Hero, for example. I got the current singer of Boston. Like, if you've seen Boston ever since its original singer passed away, this guy Tommy DiCarlo, I got to interview him. I got to interview Miles Kennedy, who was the singer of Alter Bridge, and he is if you've seen Slash, the Guns N' Roses guitarist, when he goes on tour solo, it's his vocalist as well. And then Ray Lucier, who is the drummer of Korn right now, and several other bigger names that I was just like, wow, I can't believe we're getting these people. But it just turned out that if you reached out and asked them, they'd be more than happy to do a quick interview. And that was really that lit a fire under me, I think, for wanting to do interviews and tell people's stories. And some of those interviews I did back in the day were terrible. Like, I was just completely out of my depth. But you've got to do some of that stuff in order to get to a place where you feel comfortable doing those interviews. And then I've told this story on the podcast, I believe, but in 2008, I went to a Circuit City in my college town that was going out of business, and I found a collector's edition of Fallout 3, and that was I'd heard that it had gotten really good reviews and it looked really cool, and it took place in Maryland, or the DC area at the very least. So I was like, oh yeah, let me pick this up. It was like something like $28 for the collector's edition. That was a pretty new game at that point. And I played it and loved it so much that I wanted to write a game review instead of an album review. So I did that, and I loved it. The rest is history. And I actually told Todd Howard that story, and he was very very receptive and very, very kind in accepting that was the game that really kickstarted my career and my love for writing about video games. So the other I guess the other way that I kind of leapt from the music space to the video game space was, at the time I was playing Guitar Hero and Rock Band competitively, particularly Guitar Hero, but I was playing a lot of Rock Band as well. And there was an opportunity to write about music games on a national level at a website, and I took that, and that was kind of like my first foray into writing like actual legitimate games journalism. And then from there I joined a small blog. I co-founded another website, and then started doing freelance for IGN, Kotaku, Biography, Official Xbox Magazine, all those. And then in late 2024, they hired me on at Game Informer, and I joined in the first day of 2014 was when I got the job offer, and then joined at the very start of 2015. So yeah, sorry, that was a lot of background there, but thanks for the question, Emil. And then that leads kind of into Chad Brekke on Patreon. I would be interested in hearing a sort of top 10 list of gaming soundtracks and what has stuck with you the most over the years, and where perhaps the soundtrack itself elevated the game the most for you. I also heard from the top 50 list this week, this is an older question, that you once reviewed music, so I would love to hear about that history for you in general. So I just answered that last part of the question. In terms of top 10 list of gaming soundtracks, that would be, I think, a bigger episode. But I think that Super Mario World is probably up there, even though if you really listen to Super Mario World, every single song is just the same melody, just remixed, which really demonstrates the brilliance of Koji Kondo. Super Mario World is up there. Persona 5, I mean, flat out, that might be my favorite gaming soundtrack of all time. Street Fighter 2, which I'm wearing a hoodie for, if you're watching the video version. Street Fighter 2, incredible soundtrack. Ocarina of Time, definitely have to mention that. Maybe Super Mario 64. Sonic 3 and Knuckles easily gets a top 3 spot. I'm just looking around, like maybe Pokemon Red and Blue, or maybe Fire Red and Leaf Green, since that was like, kind of more fleshed out versions of those songs. The original Splatoon is probably up there for me. Final Fantasy X. I know some of these games are just like, oh, these are my favorite games of all time, but music plays a huge role in my enjoyment of a lot of games. And I think that Final Fantasy X, if we want to drill into that real briefly, I think that they have a great mix. Nobuo Uematsu absolutely crushes it. And it has a great mix of emotional storytelling, and just kind of like appropriate music for what's happening in the story. But then every once in a while, you get just an absolute banger. Like Spira Unplugged is one of my favorite video game songs of all time. And there are moments where I will listen to that soundtrack without playing the game. Like, it's just completely unattached from the game. And because I have the memories of what was happening in the game when this song played, I will start getting a little bit emotional because it is that good, and that tied to the feelings that I was feeling when I was playing the game for the first time. So that's definitely up there. And then you have like things like Sonic Adventure 2, which has an incredible array of music that Live and Learn and Escape from the City are obviously like the headliners there, but I would say a lot of the songs there, and Sonic Adventure 1 for that matter, also is up there for me. But like individual songs, I think Tetris Effect has some really great individual tracks. Alan Wake 2, Herald of Darkness, come on. Like, and some of the other like chapter end songs are incredible for Alan Wake 2 as well. Sonic Frontiers has some bangers too. So a lot of really great soundtracks. I think that it is what Chad says here in the question. The soundtrack elevates the game. I think that's really the way to put it. And I think that's why when I talked about Sonic 3 and Knuckles, that's why I'm so bummed that there are these licensing problems with some of the soundtrack of Sonic 3. Ice Cap Zone, Launch Base Zone, Carnival Night Zone. I always want to say Casino Night or Carnival Night, but Casino Night I think is Sonic 2 and Carnival Night is Sonic 3. Not having those original songs in the re-releases really hurts that game. Even though it's still a top 10 game of all time for me, I miss those songs dearly, even though I understand the weirdness that surrounds those songs. I know we're going a little bit long here with just a few questions gotten to already. Calamity Nolan on the All Things Nintendo community Discord says, if you could create a crossover game out of two Nintendo series like Mario and Luigi Paper Jam, which two would you choose and what would the game be like? Sorry, I needed an iced coffee there for a second. I mean, the obvious answer would be like something like Metroid and Star Fox, right? Like, give us kind of what Star Fox Assault aspired to be. Have it be where there are like sky sections and ground sections and underwater sections, but instead of giving us like and allow you like here's the game, here's the pitch, right? Star Fox meets Metroid. Both of them are spacefaring franchises. When you're up, you can choose if you want to play as Samus or if you want to play as Fox, and you're collaborating, you're working as a team to accomplish a goal. So you're flying around in either your R-Wing or I forget the name of Samus's ship. But you're up there taking out enemies, completing missions. There might be some all-range mode. And then, there's the Landmaster, there's the submarine sequences. But when it's time to get out, rather than doing it as a 3D action game or a 3D shooter the way other Star Fox games have done it, turn it into a Metroidvania light and have it be you can still play as Fox if you want to in those sequences, or you can play as Samus and have it be a cool crossover series. And I think it's two franchises that are beloved but have struggled to really grab the mainstream audience, which is why I think it probably won't ever happen. Trying to think of other examples. I think a Zelda RPG would be kind of cool. Like a a straightforward RPG, not like the argument of like, oh, is Breath of the Wild an RPG? And I think that would be a cool way to take that on. More crossovers between Nintendo franchises and things like WarioWare. Like my favorite stuff in WarioWare are always like the Nintendo like retro style mini games or micro games. So doing something like that would also be cool. Okay, let's move right along. With Age of Imprisonment giving a highlight to the Musou genre, what games would you like to see given the Musou treatment, Nintendo or otherwise? Man, that's a tough one. I mean, immediately comes to mind is Final Fantasy. I think they could do something really cool with bringing in a bunch of the heroes from that. Heroes and villains, really. Maybe an expected response from me, but something that just kind of popped in my head, because we can't do Zelda because there's already been 3 Zelda Musou games. What about a Sonic Musou game? You know, hear me out. You're running from point to point very fast. You could add that in there. Sonic can do all kinds of moves that could do cool crowd control. Knuckles and Tails and Shadow all have moves that would work well in crowd control. There's a lot of enemy types that you could pull from to give the Musou genre. It's a very fast-paced action game. Why have I never thought to put Sonic and his friends and enemies in a Musou game? Like, I don't know. I don't know why I never thought of that, but I think that would work surprisingly well. Let's see. Three Sword Sama on Discord. And again, these were older questions that I just haven't gotten to. What is your game of the year? Doesn't have to be a Nintendo game or even on the Game Awards list. Thank you, Three Sword Sama. Ghost of Yote, flat out, is my game of the year for 2025. It's the follow-up to Ghost of Tsushima, which is a top 25 game of all time for me. So I kind of expected to like it, but it told a more personal story. It carried forward the beauty of Ghost of Tsushima in just incredible ways. The combat is top notch. I think it's easily the best game that I played in 2025. Now, there were several other games that I really enjoyed. I think Dispatch was a top tier game as well. Like, it surprised me how much I loved that. I kind of had moved on from that kind of narrative adventure game genre after the downfall of Telltale Games. But Dispatch really delivered on what a Telltale game and like that the animation especially of a game like that can be. If you like superhero stuff whatsoever, I think that Dispatch gets it more right than a lot of superhero games and movies and TV shows have in recent years. And if you've missed like superheroes actually fighting crime and not like every movie or TV show being like a world-ending threat, I think that you would love Dispatch. And plus, there's an incredible mini game built into the story that I would play a full experience of. I would also, for Nintendo games, Donkey Kong Bonanza and Metroid Prime 4 are the top there for me. It's hard not to love those games. So yeah, those would be my favorite games of last year. Also, Shinobi Art of Vengeance, fantastic. Brendan Roberts on Patreon. Do you think Nintendo will suffer from game fatigue in certain genres? When they showed off Mario Tennis Fever, my first thought was, we already have tennis. Do you think this is a concern for them? It is a concern for them, and I think that's why we get so much space between them. Mario Tennis Fever, I'm sorry, not Mario Tennis Fever. Mario Tennis Aces is the most recent one. You have to keep in mind that by the time Mario Tennis Fever comes out, Mario Tennis Aces will have been out for 8 years. And I don't think it's unfair for somebody who is a casual tennis fan or casual Mario Tennis fan to be like, there's already a Mario Tennis game that works on this console that I have, which, Mario Tennis Aces is a Switch game, and it's a good one. It's a good Mario Tennis game. So I don't know if fatigue is the right word as much as it is like saturation of a niche genre or a niche franchise. But I think 8 years is more than enough time. And I think that people who do enjoy the Mario sports games are ready for another Mario Tennis game. I think it's with Mario Golf really not doing it for fans lately. Like it hasn't really been like a great franchise in recent years. They haven't really figured out the code for that, which the code is just give us a fun single player RPG without frustrating mini games. Without that being like kind of the apex predator of Mario sports games, Mario Tennis is far and away the most popular one. Now, these Mario sports games have been a mixed bag. I think Mario Strikers, the most recent one, Battle League, is one that people were pretty disappointed by or underwhelmed at the very least. And Mario Golf Super Rush, which I alluded to already, was fun, but like just the single player stuff was awful. And if they can figure out a way to include a fun single player campaign and excellent mechanics and a fun gimmick, which the different rackets, it could go one way or the other on that. I don't really have a strong feeling of if that's going to be good or bad until I get my hands on it. I think it's time for Mario Tennis fever. So I don't know if that's really the right framing of it, but Nintendo is always concerned of, fatigue, because they don't want to put out two top-down action games. Like they don't want to put out another top-down action game around the time that there is a top-down Zelda game, for example, or Metroid Prime 4 was coming out in December of last year. They didn't want to put out Metroid Prime 2 and 3 for fear that people would just skip the new one and play the old ones. I think that is a real concern for Nintendo. A Nintendo employee back in like 2012, 2013 told me as much. When I asked them, why don't you put out A Link to the Past in the lead up to A Link Between Worlds? They said, well, we don't want to cannibalize A Link Between Worlds sales. Now, I don't know if that individual is still at Nintendo. I don't know how much authority they had, because it was somebody that I was talking to at an event. So I don't know if that was like an official company line, or if that was just somebody who worked at Nintendo or was hired by Nintendo to do this event saying what they thought. But, I think that is a concern, but I don't think it is in this sense. I think that if you have Mario Tennis Aces and you're perfectly happy with that, then yeah, you don't need to buy Mario Tennis Fever unless members of the media and podcasters and influencers get their hands on it and say like, wow, this actually is a giant leap forward. Then you can maybe take a look at it. But if you're satisfied with Mario Tennis Aces, then yeah, I don't think you need to upgrade to Mario Tennis Fever unless something really cool happens. Big Mitch over on Patreon has 3 here. Which Breath of the Wild divine beast would win in a fight? Oh man, let me bring them up because I'm terrible with their names. Okay, so we have Vanaboris, who is the camel-looking one in the Gerudo Desert. We have Varuta, which is the elephant one in Zora's Domain. We have Vamedo, which is the flying one, and we have Varudania, which is the lizard in Death Mountain. Okay. Which would win in a fight? I mean, I'm kind of in the camp of Vamedo because it can fly around. And I think that would be a challenge for some of these divine beasts. Varudania is also one that I think, because it can deal with all terrain. I think those are my 2 front runners. I mean, they all have kind of like that guardian tech where they can blast lasers at each other. But I think that the more nimble creatures, I think, would be at an advantage since they all have similar tech. So I'm going to go with Vamedo, the flying one, and then Varudania as number 2. I'll probably put... I mean, I don't really like Vanaboris or Varuta that much, but I guess I would put Varuta as the next one there. Okay, so Big Mitch's next question is, what game or games would you most like to see ported to Switch 2? So we did talk about this a little bit in the end of the year episode. And let me bring that up actually, if I may. Okay, so the ones that I had listed out for games I most wanted to see come to Switch, were Baldur's Gate 3, which obviously, Claire Obscura Expedition 33, because obviously, Dispatch, which by the time that episode hit, Dispatch was already announced for Switch 2, Metaphor ReFantazio, and Yakuza Like a Dragon. So, I mean, Claire Obscura is a pretty easy answer. I think that would play extremely well on Switch and Switch 2. But Baldur's Gate 3, I think we've been waiting for that for so long that it's hard to reconcile with the fact that it's still not on the Switch. This third and final question: are we ever going to see any love for the Burnout series again? Frowny face. That's a tough one because Criterion, I think, is working full time on Need for Speed now, so it's almost like the Burnout franchise has been absorbed by the Need for Speed franchise. Let me see what Criterion's up to, which it's a tricky one because I would love. Let's see, Criterion Games. Let's see, what games are they working on now? Battlefield 6, of course. Everything was under the Battlefield 6 umbrella. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough because Need for Speed is always going to be a priority for EA, and then Battlefield is going to be a priority over Need for Speed. So I don't know what opportunity they would have unless they kind of put it out as like a license to another company. And I don't know what company would be good enough to do that. Maybe Playground Games, the Forza Horizon developers, but they're having plenty of success with Forza Horizon. I don't think the Split Second devs are really around anymore. Let's see. BlackRock Studio. They were shut down 15 years ago now. So it's tough because like a lot of the studios that would make the most sense are enjoying success in other things. Three Fields Entertainment is the one that sticks out to me, which they're really having a hard time right now from what I understand. Yeah, they did a game called Dangerous Golf, which is just a fun arcadey style golfing game. Then they did a game called Danger Zone, which is a kind of like the Burnout crash mode where you drive a car into an intersection and create as much chaos as possible. And then they just did a game called Recreation, which is kind of like Burnout meets Forza Horizon, where it's like an open world Burnout style game, but it just doesn't feel like it has the same oomph behind it. Dangerous Driving is their other one, where it is like a Burnout style game. So they unfortunately have been put on. They put the entire studio, I think, on redundancy notice, which basically means like they are almost out of money and in danger of closing. So it would probably need to happen sometime soon if they were gonna get that. But I would love the Burnout series to come back. I think Burnout 3 Takedown and Burnout Revenge are two of my favorite racing games from that era and remain kind of like a high that I've been chasing in the racing game genre for a while. Burnout Paradise is as popular as that is. I never really jived with the open world style of Burnout. I just want the more linear races. But yeah, I would love to see more Burnout. I will say that Todd Howard specifically referenced the Burnout series when talking about the studio's inspiration for developing the VAT system in Fallout. You can read that in that article that I referenced at the start of this episode. So cool to see that get a shout out. Three Sword Sama comes back on Discord. Best and worst Christmas gifts related to gaming. Oh, man. So best would have to be getting my Game Boy Color with Pokemon Blue Christmas 98, because I was so obsessed and that just set me down an entirely different path of my life. Getting my Super Nintendo, I believe it was Christmas 1992. It was kind of like that one last thing that my parents had where they're like, oh, that's all the presents. Okay. Oh, but what's that behind the couch? Like kind of like A Christmas Story with the Red Ryder BB gun. They pulled one of those on me getting a Super Nintendo. And that was the first game console that I ever fully owned. Before that, it was just like cousins or family friends would bring over their Nintendos and I would have some games that I had received, but I never owned a Nintendo or an NES. I don't really have a worst. I mean, maybe just like games that I either wasn't interested in that my parents just thought looked like I would like, or just a game that I asked for and it turned out that I just hated it. But I can't really think of any off the top of my head. I'm sure there were some like crappy Xbox 360 games that I was excited to get, and then I played it and was like, this is terrible. But nothing really comes to mind. We'll do a couple more here. We're past the hour mark, but I know I spent a lot of time talking about, some stuff at the top of the show. Burnout 713 on Twitter said, obviously Switch games generally have sold very well, but do you think it's possible Nintendo leaves potential sales on the table through its high game prices and lack of sales? I'm assuming you mean like discounts. I have skipped numerous releases over the last generation for this reason. Well, there you go. Yeah, absolutely. They miss out on some sales on like getting higher sales numbers because they don't put their games on sale. If they wanted to crush their, like, say they put out a game, they're like, hey, we want to topple this game, like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. It's probably never going to have a game that sells that well, at least for a while, because that game is one of the top selling games of all time. But if they say they wanted to do that, they could put out a new Zelda game for $20 and they'd probably sell extremely well, or they put out the next Mario game for $20. But that's antithetical to Nintendo's reasoning for keeping their prices high. And this is, I'm not saying I agree with this, but they kind of have that Apple, the Apple mentality of like, we're going to release premium products and we're going to keep the prices high and it'll rarely get a meaningful discount. And the reason for that is because it makes it more of a prestige item. And if you recall, like Ubisoft, when they would put out games, they would be on sale. I remember, I think it was Assassin's Creed Revelations came out, was it November 15th, 2011? And Black Friday was a couple weeks later, or maybe even just 1 week later. And I think I remember, like, I bought Assassin's Creed Revelations when it first came out. And then I think a week later, it was on sale for like $20 on Black Friday. And it was like, that really just makes me feel like garbage that I just spent $60 on this game. And I know that's an extreme example, but I think Nintendo likes maintaining the fact that it is a premium product and it is something that people, whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, people want to spend extra money for it. So I think that's a primary reason. Now, I do think they get carried away with it and not putting, a game like Mario Odyssey on a significant sale until like 6 years later. I think that is a little ridiculous, and they are absolutely leaving money on the table there. But I think that also has the other effect of like, when they do go on sale, then there's like, it's kind of like a big thing, right? And then you're like, oh, Mario Odyssey's on sale. It's $40 6 years after it came out. This is my only chance to really get it at this price. So I'm going to pull the trigger here. I've been hearing about this game for so long. So it does have a good effect in their perspective as well, because they can still get those purchases. It'll just take a couple of years for them to come. But Nintendo's in such a great financial position. They don't need to worry about leaving sales on the table at this point, I don't think. So yeah. Let's do two more. Pratable over on Discord says, what is your ideal Nintendo game equivalent of a turducken? 3 existing standalone games or franchises with their mechanics smashed into one. Oh boy. I'm going to do, let's keep it in my wheelhouse. Let's do Zelda. So Zelda, Dead Cells, and would it be too weird to say Fire Emblem? Like, have some degree of strategy and have some degree of like side-scrolling action with like the Zelda brand. Like, I think that would be cool. Yeah, let's do that. Zelda with gameplay mechanics of Fire Emblem and Dead Cells. I think that would be a cool game without really thinking about it too much. And then let's end on this. ChapsMyAss over on Discord says, decision time. One of the following franchises will be the next to get a live action movie. One will get a game release next year, and the rest will have nothing happen with them for the next 10 years. So Kirby, Star Fox, Earthbound, Wii Sports, and Metroid. Okay, I think this is pretty easy for me. So one will get a live action movie. Metroid is the easy answer for me. I think that would be incredible if they could lean into kind of like the horror, eerie feeling of that franchise. I think that's a slam dunk. Even give us Brie Larson, even though she's voicing Rosalina in Mario Galaxy movie. One will get a game release next year. Let's go Star Fox. You know, we've gotten a lot of Kirby lately. I hate to put the pink puffball on the bench, but let's do Star Fox. We're overdue for that. I've never been the biggest Earthbound fan. Sorry, Earthbound and Mother fans. And we've gotten a lot of Kirby recently. So I would rather get a Star Fox game than another Kirby game. So Metroid gets a live action movie. Star Fox gets a game release next year. And then Kirby, Earthbound, and Wii Sports go on the bench for a little bit. Yeah, I think that's the way I'll go with it. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope you had fun. I know that, we went on some tangents. We wasn't the most Nintendo related thing, the most Nintendo related episode and most Nintendo related topics, but we covered some ground here. As a reminder, if you want to get any questions in future episodes like this one, you can join the Patreon. That gets you priority access. Obviously, it's not the exclusive access because we do pull some from social media and things of that nature. But yeah, thank you so much to all the people who support me on Patreon. Again, without you, it would not be possible for me to continue doing this show. But yeah, thank you to Retro Gamer for featuring me and telling my story in the magazine. And be sure to subscribe to Game Informer if you are so inclined. We got some big stuff on the horizon that we're really excited about. I just wrote a big feature that's going to be in our next issue that we haven't announced yet. I'm very excited to talk more about that on this podcast. But for now, thank you so much for listening to this episode of All Things Nintendo. As you know, my Patreon and the associated community Discord are the best ways to get any questions or comments in. But you can also get in touch with me at brian@allthingsnintendo.com or hit me up on social media at Brian P. Shea. And of course, as always, go ahead and subscribe to Game Informer magazine for all the latest news, game reviews, previews, features, interviews, and cover stories. But for now, that is our show this week. Thank you so much for listening. Take care. We'll see you next time. Hey guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode of All Things Nintendo. Before we wrap up this episode, I just want to give a special shout out to the folks who make this show happen, the $10 patrons of the All Things Nintendo podcast. Alex Stadnik, Andy Junkins, Ben Richlin, Chad Brekke, ChapsMyAss, Derek Sigmund, Dusty Beaman, IanTClark, Jawar Hello, Johnny 5, Jose Villalobos, Joshua DeProy, Casey Radioman, Cody Gibson, Creeper207, Ozman83, Paul @DrunkOnMako, Pratable, Rob McCann, Bobby Mac265, Robert Sosa, Roberto Nieves, Roger Reichart, Russell Sayer, Smithy Poo, Zane Sink, and Zek 3 Sword Sama. Again, I cannot tell you enough how much I appreciate you supporting the All Things Nintendo podcast. This show would not exist without you. Thank you so much to everyone who supports me.
Hello, it's Ian from Respect the Crit, an inclusive tabletop RPG actual play podcast about exploring new worlds.
Our camera pans down on the world of Ord Mantell.
New characters.
Carolus would like to make a counter-offer.
Chinese 2 Scoops Charizard.
If that's your voice, I'm gonna be so excited.
Yeah. And playing whatever we want to play. Sabak!
What a great game.
From Dungeons and Dragons.
Can you roll another D20?
12.
You, for the next 72 hours, are 12 years old.
Oh Oh no!
To the post-apocalypse.
He's a vault dweller, you could probably tell with the jumpsuit and everything like that. Hey, lads, you gotta tell me where your vault is?
It's not gonna happen.
We've got stories in all kinds of settings, including video games.
This is gonna be a Sephiroth-free experience.
Horror.
Crawling out of the mirror, a nightmarish amalgamation of twisted limbs and jagged teeth, its visage a grotesque mockery of humanity.
Oh my god! And a galaxy far, far away.
This is fun, let's do it again!
And then he'll punch it and we'll go into light speed.
The dice tell a story, and we have a hell of a lot of fun rolling with it.
No way.
No.
Are you
joking
me?
Oh my god. This is so... Yes.
Whatever the system, miss or a hit, you always gotta respect the crit. Join us bi-weekly every other Wednesday for characters, campaigns, and new episodes, anywhere podcasts exist.